Hi folks, this is Mr. Robeson and this is regular statistics. So today we're going to look at the difference between a sample and a census, and we're going to look at some sampling techniques. So how to take samples. All right, so what is a census and why don't we just always use one? So a census is a study that attempts to collect data from every individual in the population. All right, so a population is everyone that we are interested in. All right, so I would write down what census is, and I would write down what a population is. So it's everyone that we're interested in. So a census, they ask everyone that we could be interested in about whatever questions we want to know answers to. So the pros of this is that we should know exactly what the entire population thinks or how they react to something. Like asking them a survey, we can find out what they think about something. All right, and the United States does this every 10 years. We're required by the Constitution to do a census, and it's happening this year in 2020. Hopefully you've already responded or your family has already responded. So the cons to this. So sometimes it's very difficult to do a census because a population can be very big. Like we have 328 million people, at least estimated, in the United States. And it's very difficult to interview 328 million people. It would take a very long time. All right. Another problem with it is that mistakes will happen. So it will not be perfect. No matter what you do, there will be mistakes still. So the data is not going to be perfect. So if the data is not going to be perfect and it takes us a lot of work to do, we probably want to do something else instead. All right. Other times this would be the way to go. Like if we wanted to know what everybody in the class thought about something, since there's only like 25 to 30 of you, we could just ask all of you. Wouldn't be that hard to do. All right, so instead of using the entire population, everybody, often we will just use a sample instead. So like here's our entire population here. This is everyone from who we're interested in. And what we do is we take a sample from them, and it's just a few people, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we could say our sample size here is 6. All right, and everyone we usually use capital N. It's a bigger number, so we use big N. All right. So why do we use samples? So they are easier, they're faster, they're cheaper, and our answers are just about as accurate. So usually it's just about as accurate. All right. So right now, a lot of sampling is happening about the presidential election. They sample registered voters to see who they plan to vote for. So they probably report this sort of stuff on the news almost every night. All right, so now there are a couple of issues that come up with sampling. So one of them is called sampling error, and this is basically when you take a bad sample. Sometimes it's not your fault, sometimes it is your fault, all right? But some bad samples happen, like maybe you want to get men and women and your sample ends up with all women just by random chance. It could happen. It's not likely, but it could happen. Or it could end up with just a lot more women than men, and that would be a sampling error. Right? Sampling variation is another thing that comes up with samples. This is not a bad thing. It's just different samples have different answers. So every sample you take is going to have different answers. Like if I pick 10 people off the street and have them guess how old I am, and then I pick 10 people, other people, on a different day and ask them, their answers are going to be different. They're going to guess different things, all right? And that is sampling variation. They vary in their answers, and error is when we get a bad sample. All right, so here are our 6 sampling techniques. All the ones that have the word random in them are good. So a simple random sample, a stratified random sample, a clustered random sample, a systematic random sample, voluntary sample, not random, convenient sample, not random. All right, so just a little recap of what each one of these is. You may not want to write down all these words, and we'll do an example of each one of these in the next couple slides here. So a simple random sample, or sometimes what we call an SRS. The easiest way to do this is we just take all the names in our population and we put all the names into like a hat or a bowl or something. We mix them up and then we choose names from the hat. All right, and whatever we get, they just describe what ends up being, like, do we ask them questions? Do we put them in our experiment? All right, the technical definition for a simple random sample is all samples of size n have the same chance of being selected. All right, I won't really quiz you on that as long as you know how to take the sample. That's what I'm looking for. A random number generator can also be used for simple random samples, but we're not really going to go over that either. Stick with the hat. The hat's the easiest way to do it. Stratified random samples. So stratified means layers. All right, so layers or groups. So what happens is we break the population up into groups that are somehow related to each other. Like all the men in one group, all the women in another group. And then we randomly choose some from each group. All right? And that becomes our sample. So if we pick like 10 men, 10 women, that would be some from each group. All right, make sure to describe what gets assigned. When we're taking these stratas, like we could take simple random samples as part of this. Like we could take a random sample from the men and a simple random sample from the women as part of our stratus. But it still is a stratified sample because we broke it into groups. All right, the other one that involves groups is a clustered random sample. So now the population is broken up into groups again, but these groups are all similar to each other. So that it's not like all men and all women, it's a mixed group. So every group is a mixed group. All right, then we randomly select a few groups. So everybody in the group gets to be part of the sample. All right. The systematic one. So this one involves lining things up. So we line them up or we put them in order. We choose a random place to start. And then we choose every nth person, like every 5th person or every 10th person in line. And they become part of our sample. Voluntary, we ask people, like people volunteer to be part of the sample, like online surveys or things like that. Those are generally voluntary response. If you do polls on Facebook or something like that, those are also voluntary response. Convenient samples, this is when you are just asking the people that are easy to sample. So like, say you want to know something about the entire school, but that you only ask people that you're friends with. Right? That's a convenient sample because those people are the easy ones to ask. So the voluntary and convenience are the ones we don't like. All right? If you need to write down more here, go ahead and pause it and write down more. That's the beauty of the video, so you can always stop them. So examples of each. So first up, our simple random sample. One way to do a simple random sample is the lottery. So here are the balls 1 through 60 rolling around in here. All right, we mix them up and then we choose 5 balls. And that becomes our sample. The winning lottery numbers would be our sample. All right, here's our hat. We can put all of our names folded up on papers in a hat, and we can just pull the papers out of the hat one at a time, and that becomes our sample. Stratified. All right, so this is usually the tricky one. So here's our population. Our population has yellow people, red people, and purple people. All right, we break it up into the strata. So we've got all of our yellow people together, all of our red people together, and all of our purple people together. And then we choose some from each. All right, since they were mostly yellow, we picked mostly yellow, and then some more red, and then some more purple. All right, so and they do this often when they test drugs and things like that. So we're currently testing a new vaccine for coronavirus. They want to have men and women. They want to have white people, black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, all different kinds of people in their samples to make sure it works well for everybody. All right, so their example here, we take from each gender, we take a random sample of 200 people are selected to be part of the trial. These 400 people, 200 men and 200 women are our sample. There's lots of different ways we can separate into different strata for stratified samples. We can do it by race, we can do it by hair color, eye color, political parties, age, location. I mean, anything you can think of to separate things into different groups, you can use that to stratify. All right, the cluster sample, the other one that involves groups. So with the cluster sample over here, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups, and we're picking this entire group, and this entire group. And we're skipping this group, and this group, and this group. All right. With the stratified, see how we got groups, and then they're picking some from each group. Like they got 3 here, 4 here, 3 here, actually no, 4 there, 3, 3, 3. So they're picking some from each group. So here's our written example. So a researcher wants to take a sample of NBA players to ask if they thought going to college before the NBA was useful. What the researcher does, though, is they select 3 teams and then survey everyone on each of those 3 teams. That becomes a cluster because they did everyone on those 3 randomly selected teams. If we were doing stratified, we'd pick like 3 players from each team. But we'd have to go to every single team. It's a lot easier to just pick 3 different teams and ask them. So that is our clustered sample. All right, our systematic sample. This involves lining things up. All right, so when you go through airport security, you have to line up to go through security 1 person at a time. Every morning, the TSA chooses 2 random numbers, like 42 and 8. And they start checking people at the 42nd person to go through security. And then after that, they choose every 8th person to be checked. All right, so they'll pull them off to the side after they go through security, and they'll check their bags. That's the random check. All right, another way we do this is what's called the census long form. So census workers will start at a random spot, and then they'll go every 3rd, like 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then they'll interview the people at that 3rd house, every 3rd house, and ask them to fill out a longer form for the census, some more detailed questions. All right, but notice the houses are lined up here, the people are lined up to go through security there. All right, voluntary response. So if you ever watch like TV shows, some TV news shows like to do this. One of the shows I watch on Saturday morning sometimes is called Smirconish, and he has a daily poll. Every single day he has a poll online, and he asks the viewers to go online and respond to the poll. All right, well, people are choosing to be part of the sample, and we don't want people to choose to be part of the sample, so they are choosing to respond. Because usually the only people that are going to respond are the ones that feel passionately about the issue, and you're not going to get the opinion of lots of other people. So this is not a good way to do a sample. I mean, it works for him, for his show, it's fine. He likes to debate with the viewers' answers and things like that. All right, so here's an example. This was from Tuesday, I think. Tuesday this week. And so the question was down here at the bottom, which party will win control of the U.S. Senate? All right, so the blue here in our donut graph here, our donut pie chart, is the Democrats will win. The red here is the Republicans will win. And this little section here is people that think it's going to be a tie. And we had 5,000 voters. I mean, that's a good number of voters, but again, it's voluntary response, so we don't really want to use voluntary response, so we don't really care about the results. And the last one is a convenient sample. We sample the people that are convenient to sample. It's a bad way of doing things, and here's why. So we want to know what's the best team in baseball. So a researcher goes to an Oakland A's game, and when the game ends with an A's win, he goes to the parking lot and surveys fans as to which team is the best team in baseball. Each person he asks is the sample. Well, the A's just won. These guys are A's fans in the A's parking lot. Obviously, they're going to say that the A's are the best team in baseball. Is that true? I don't know. Probably not right now because I think they're out of it right now. But that's convenient for the researcher because they're at the A's game. All right? So that's not going to be something he wants to do. All right? We're going to get bad results there. All right, I'll post these links down here at the bottom under the video. And if you want more help on these, if you're not sure about some of these sampling techniques, you can check these out. And that is it. Look out for an assignment on Google Classroom after this that goes with this. And please try and do that assignment before the next class. All right, bye.